Hey everyone, it's Nick Yuskevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners. This is our first strategy video of 2017 Tee to Green season. And for this video, it is going to be 3 simple tips to help win your GPP lineups. I think this will be helpful for a wide range of people, whether it's beginners to daily fantasy, beginners to daily fantasy golf, or maybe someone who's more experienced with daily fantasy golf but getting a little bit of new information here, or potentially just a refresher for some other people who are just getting back into golf, to starting or just kind of restarting up with golf again. Obviously we've got the 2017 portion of the season here, and it's a good thing to also just refresh on, just because there's some tips here that I think some people think they're following or they're using when they're making lineups, but then at the end of the day, when they actually sit down and crunch the lineups, they're not actually doing it. So I think it'll be good for a lot of different people. And with that, let's just jump right into it. Tip number 1, leave salary on the table. This is pretty straightforward and applies to all sports and daily fantasy. A vast majority of GPP lineups are going to use all the salary or only leave like $100 on the table, or $200 at the most. I think you should be leaving at least $400 on the table and up to maybe about $700-800 on the table. That's usually a good number to go with. Some people out there say you should be leaving like $1,000 on the table or even more than that. I think that's a little extreme. I don't think you need to go that much, because that big drop off really is after $100-200 on the table range, kind of in there. Now, if you're wondering, and you've maybe heard this and you're wondering, why is it important to leave salary on the table in GPPs with GPP strategy? It's important for 2 reasons. Number 1, GPPs have a very top-heavy payout structure, where first gets a lot of money, and then there's a big drop-off to second place, and then the payout structure gets a lot flatter as you move farther on down the leaderboard, but it's very top-heavy for first place. It's the second reason why it's important is because you want to have a unique lineup, or a lineup that is not shared with anyone. And basically is, if you use a lineup that is you're using all the salary available to you, and then you make a lineup that's basically chalk or all really popular plays, and you're splitting and you have a lineup that's shared with 5 other people, or 4 other people, let's say. So you're splitting it 5 ways. You're in the Millionaire Maker. You're already committing. Your potential winnings are only $200,000 at the beginning of the tournament, which is absolutely just a horrific investment when you're playing the Millionaire Maker. Any GPP you enter, you should always have 2 goals in mind. Number 1 is to play to win, and number 2 is to make sure you have a unique lineup. That should be your goal, your 2 goals every time you enter a GPP. If you want to do something that's easier to cash and something that's got a little bit of a different strategy, then you should be doing cash lineups, whether it's 50-50s, head-to-heads, double ups, all those kinds of things. That would be more for you. But if you're going to play GPPs, win and make a unique lineup. Those are the 2 most important things. And then the last point on this, I will just say, because this has to do with lineup differentiation, is this mainly does apply to the huge GPPs, such as the Birdie or the Millionaire Maker. Contests that basically going to have over, they're going to have 10,000, tens of thousands of entries, or over 100,000 entries. If it's a GPP that's smaller, like only like 1,000 or 2,000 entrants, you still want to differentiate a little bit by either A, leaving a few hundred on the table, or B, you want to at least make sure you have a couple guys in your lineup that are going to be pretty low owned. So, because at the end of the day, no matter what the GPP is, you want to make sure you have a lineup that's different than everybody else's. It's just, you have to pay more attention to that when you have GPPs that are a much bigger field. So, okay, pretty simple on number 1. Now we'll move on to number 2. The second tip. You want to fade the higher-owned, lower-priced players. And a lot of you who have been with us here with Tee to Green have heard me talk about this a lot in the past, and I'm going to continue to say it here because it continues to happen. So here's why you want to do this. You need all 6 guys to make the cut to win your GPPs. The only real exceptions to this are when it's a really small GPP and the percentage of entries with all 6 guys making the cut is really small. So maybe there's an exception to this where, I don't know, there's a GPP with 2,000 people in it, and this PGA tournament has a handful of guys, $10,000, $9,000, $8,000 who were all 20-25% owned or something, then they all missed the cut. Like, then this could happen, but it's just a very rare circumstance where you can win a GPP and not have the winner. So, or excuse me, it's not where you have the winner, but also not where you have somebody miss the cut. You're going to need all 6 guys to make the cut because you're getting a vast majority of your DraftKings points by playing golf holes. So, and for those of you that are new to golf, just in case to make sure we cover this, in PGA tournaments, most of the tournaments are going to be tournaments that have a cut after Friday's round or after 36 holes. What it means is you're going to have a tournament that's like 140 to 150 golfers. And what happens is after the first 36 holes are played, there is a cut applied. And the top 70 plus ties that are on there on the leaderboard after 36 holes, they get to play on the weekend or play the final 36 holes. The people who are below that, they don't get to play golf. They're done. And the way you get DraftKings points mostly in daily fantasy golf is by playing golf holes. If you're new to daily fantasy golf and you've played other sports, it's kind of like basically saying, okay, I'm going to roster a bunch of players in the NFL, but if they don't perform well enough in the first half, they don't get to play in the second half. Something that would be like, it's not the exact same comparison, but it's something similar. Like your player's only going to play half the snaps, your player's only going to play half the playing time in NBA or something like that. It's kind of similar a little bit to that, if you will. So you are going to need all 6 guys to make the cut, essentially, to have a chance of winning your GPPs. Okay, so building off of this, the players who are priced in the 6 to 7K range or 5, 6, 7K range, the cheapest golfers, they all have a substantially lesser chance at making the cut than the guys that are priced more in that $10, $11, $12,000 range. That's pretty obvious. But there's the catch to this. When you actually look at the numbers of the ownerships, they aren't that far apart sometimes. A lot of times you'll have a handful of cheaper players in that $6,000, $7,000 range who are owned roughly the same amount as those $10,000, $11,000 guys. This definitely happens. And so, for example, so let's say you would decide to fade somebody that's like priced $7,500 and he is owned in 25% of lineups and he ends up missing the cut. You've already knocked out 25% of the field. And if there's somebody priced in that $7,000 range, there's a pretty good, there's usually at least a 1 in 3 chance that player is missing the cut in that specific tournament coming up, or 1 in 4 maybe at the, I would say at the worst 1 in 4. That golfer is going to miss the cut at least 1 out of every 4 times. Usually when a golfer's priced in that $7,000 range, or 1 in 5 maybe, just I'll be safe. But or it's going to be 1 in 2, or even money the cheaper you get. Just depending how the pricing works and where it's at. So essentially to say, the cheaper the golfer is, the more likely they are to miss the cut, obviously. So while obviously now if you're concerned about this a little bit and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, well, I've been in these situations in GPP tournaments where I see this golfer that's priced $7,500 and he's had 3 top 10s in his last 5 tournaments, and he's a great course fit, and he's just playing really good golf lately, or whatever it might be, and great statistics and all that. I'm afraid he's going to win the tournament. Here's the deal. While obviously someone in the 6 to 7K range is going to win a tournament here and there, it's extremely rare that one person or one of those couple people that are owned that highly is actually going to end up winning the tournament. If I give you 2 or 3 golfers and I get the field, and I'm giving you 2 or 3 golfers that are in that 6 to 7K range, I'm going to win 99+% of the time, obviously. And if you say you're concerned, maybe let's say that yeah, but he'll still probably be in contention and he'll give me a top 10 or top 20. Even if he does do that, that doesn't mean you need him to win your GPPs. Because remember, with DraftKings scoring, the first place person on the leaderboard gets 30 fantasy points. The second place player gets 20 fantasy points. It's a big drop off from 30 to 20. And then it's just 2-point fantasy increments from 2nd all the way down to 7th. It's from 7th to 10th. It's just 1-point fantasy increments the way it drops each place. And then once you get past 11th, the places are grouped in 5s, and it's just 1-point fantasy increments from there, from 11th to 15th, 16th to 20th, and it goes like that all the way down to 30th. And then it goes in groups of 10 places, 31st to 40th and 41st to 50th in 1-point fantasy increments. So it's kind of actually similar to how the payout structure works in GPPs, with the way the DraftKings points work with the players on the leaderboard, in terms of it's top heavy, and then it gets flatter as you move farther on down. It's pretty much the same concept. So that's something to recognize, that it may look like this player at $7,500 looks just amazing and you should play him, and you're just afraid he's going to win. There's still a very, very, very good chance he is not going to win. And even if he does somehow play well or whatever, it's not the end of the world, and you can still make it up easily. Because I promise you, every tournament, there are golfers priced in the $6,000 to $7,000 range that are only a couple percent owned that end up finishing in the top 5 or the top 10 that you will be able to make up with it just as easily. And it's also the last thing, if you're new to golf, DraftKings golf a little bit, is because you're accumulating most of your DraftKings points based on the golf holes that you play, and you get a lot more points for birdies and obviously a lot more points for eagles. It's half a point for par, 3 points for birdie, and 8 points for eagle. Like, you can make up the difference in like a handful of places on the leaderboard by simply having one more birdie, or just having get one of the bonus streaks or something like that. So it's very easy to make it up that way. So I just wouldn't worry about it. Sorry, the last thing, if I didn't make this clear on this second point, this only applies to PGA events that have a cut with a 140, 150 person field, or just like a full size field. If these are tournaments like the WGC, the WGCs that only have like 70 people, the SBS Tournament Champions that only had 32 people, the Tour Championship, which is a smaller number, those tournaments, it's completely different. It's kind of a different salary structure. There's no cut. The ownerships get different. I wouldn't worry about their nearly as much. It still comes into effect a little bit, but just not nearly as much. So just keep in mind, for the new people that are for daily fantasy golf, this is especially important just for the regular PGA Tour events, which will be on like 90% of the tournament. So it'll happen most of the time. So, and you'll pick up on that pretty quickly, I think. So the last thing, number 3, the third tip, is to not be shy on taking risks, but just don't be stupid either. Don't be extremely contrarian with a bunch of your picks, or don't just make a contrarian pick for the sake of being contrarian. You need to have reason, of course, with all your picks. You want to find at least a couple good reasons with somebody who don't, maybe it's somebody who doesn't seem to be mentioned a lot, who has great course fit and has great stats lately, but just has had a couple really bad holes in a couple of his recent tournaments that cost him, and he's just, 95% of the holes he's played have been great. Maybe he's had a couple unlucky bounces. Maybe he's historically a fantastic putter and he's hitting the ball really well as of late, but he just struggled putting the last couple tournaments, and, because putting has variance, that's going to turn around quickly. There are a lot of different things you can look at when you're trying to find out which golfers you want to pick for an upcoming tournament. But it's just basically to say, don't be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but you need to find good reason behind your contrarian picks. And then the last thing I will say to sum all this is just kind of a bonus point to everything with ownership. You don't need, and you actually shouldn't, it depends on how many lineups you're making, of course, but you don't need to avoid highly owned, expensive guys unless it's like way out of control, like it's over 50% owned or something like that. So unless somebody is going to start playing like Tiger Woods did in the early 2000s, which is extremely unlikely given the amount of talent that's in the game right now, although Justin Thomas over the last couple of weeks has decided to play like that for a very brief amount of time, at least for 2 weeks. Or it's been going on for a little longer than that, I should be fair to him. But unless somebody starts playing like that, no one's going to be owned 50+% of the time. And unless we get to that point, you don't need to be fading highly owned, expensive guys. And here's what I mean by this. It's basically, if you really like, let's say, Rory McIlroy going to a tournament, or Jordan Spieth, or Jason Day, or Dustin Johnson, just any one of those guys, and you're expecting him to be 30% owned or something like that, that's perfectly fine, since this player has obviously a significantly greater chance at winning the tournament and making the cut as opposed to somebody we were talking about in that $6,000 to $7,000 range. So, and obviously, you don't want to miss out on that person winning the golf tournament. So, it's very more important to make just your best picks as far as the expensive guys go and the most popular guys. So, and you can just differentiate at other spots easily with, obviously using some lesser owned guys that are cheaper, and then obviously leaving money on the table as well. There's plenty of other ways to do it. So that is it for this video. Hopefully, these tips helped you for whether you're a beginner in daily fantasy or you're a little more experienced with daily fantasy golf, and it's just a good refresher. But in any case, that is it for this video. And of course, you can always follow me at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter. Follow Daily Fantasy on Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. I'm at Nick Yuskevich, and then of course our YouTube channel. Subscriptions are always appreciated, and I always appreciate you guys watching. And best of luck with your lineups.